Scholars of political science believe that mediation is an integral part of international diplomacy and conflict resolution. But these scholars also believe that such a mediator should be a neutral, unbiased actor. And more importantly, the mediator should have credible track record and should be seen as a reliable player in international relations. But today, the world is faced with a very unique and rare and exceptional situation. We have a state actor with a questionable track record and dubious past, which is placing itself in the midst of one of the biggest conflicts of today, that is the US Iran war, and trying to act as a mediator. I'm referring to Pakistan's mediation of the US Iran war. So, in this session, we need to examine whether this is a diplomatic masterstroke by Pakistan and should India be worried. Pakistan is all set to host the peace talks between US and Iran tomorrow, that is on the 10th of April. According to reports, the US is likely to be represented by senior officials led by US Vice President JD Vance, along with Steve Witkoff, Trump's envoy to the Middle East, and along with his son in law, Jared Kushner, who has been playing a key role since 2016 in global geopolitics. Along with this, the Iranian side is likely to be represented at Islamabad to lead the peace talks in the hopes that this conflict could be brought to an end. For now, Pakistan has managed to play a balancing act between US and Iran while working out the 2-week ceasefire that was announced a couple of days ago. But now we have a very big question in front of us. We need to try and answer these 6 questions that you have on your screen. And that is exactly the focus of my discussion. Why Pakistan has been accepted by both US and Iran as the most viable mediator? Weren't there any other alternatives? What about Pakistan's questionable and duplicitous track record? Does it mean Pakistan is in a much better position than India? Can it really drive a solution? We should also try to understand what is Pakistan's real motive. Is there a hidden agenda behind it? Should India be cautious given that Pakistan will manage to raise its global profile because of its mediation efforts? More importantly, is Pakistan a credible international actor? I think most of you already know the answer to the third question. But we will try to examine, does Pakistan have any leverage with US and Iran? Can it really drive both the conflicting parties towards a meaningful compromise? And we'll try to answer, should we see this as India's diplomatic failure? There are critics in India pointing out that India should have taken the lead. And there are other extreme viewpoints who are pointing out that Pakistan is just a client state, a dalal, and we can't droop to Pakistan's level. So let's examine these questions and try to understand what are the concerns for India, and should India also be thankful that Pakistan is playing this role to try and end this war, which is having a global impact. So let's look at all the sides of the argument. But what is special about this session is that I'll be using political theories to explain the role of a mediator while mediating such conflicts. This session would be extremely helpful for students of international relations for UPSC Civil Services exam, and as well as those who have PSIR as their optional. There are some very interesting theories I would like to bring into play to try and answer these 6 questions that you see on your screen. So let's start with a brief history of mediation and some background so that you grasp the concept of mediation in political science and international relations. See, mediation has a very long history going back to ancient times. One of the first ever recorded mediation in case of a conflict goes back to the Sumerian Empire, when King Meselim had mediated between 2 city-states to resolve a conflict. This was 4,000 years ago. But however, I would like to take references from our own rich civilizational past. If you look at Kautilya's Arthashastra, Chanakya also emphasized the importance of mediation and striking a compromise to end conflicts, to find peaceful negotiated settlements in order to end international disputes. This is something which has continued to inspire political philosophers and thinkers. But what, according to me, is the most apt example would be the Hindu epic Mahabharata, that focuses on the role of Lord Krishna in acting as a mediator, a counselor between the Pandavas and the Kauravas. in the lead up to the Kurukshetra war and during the battle and later post battle as well. Critics, especially scholars who have developed critiques of the characters of Mahabharata, they point out that Lord Krishna was not a very neutral, unbiased mediator, that he was biased in favor of Pandavas. They even argue that Lord Krishna, in a way, laid the foundation for the Kurukshetra conflict in the Mahabharata. But there are counter arguments to this. There are those who say that Lord Krishna was biased, yes, but not just towards Pandavas because they were Pandavas, but Krishna's bias was towards Dharma, to protect Dharma and defeat Adharma, which the Kauravas represented. So that tells you about the character of a mediator. It could be an individual or it could be a state or an institution. A mediator is expected to possess certain qualities, certain characteristics. A mediator should not only be neutral and unbiased, a mediator should also have great communication skills, something that Lord Krishna possesses in the Mahabharata. A mediator should also have a lot of patience. A mediator should try to strike a balanced compromise that can satisfy both the parties in a conflict, which will allow both of them to claim some sort of victory. This is very much needed in today's world, in contemporary geopolitics. You can't have a complete outright surrender of one party. No country or no state, unless and until they're defeated militarily in the battlefield, will ever accept a unconditional surrender. So, if you really want a genuine mediation effort to resolve a conflict, you need to ensure that the compromise is balanced. So, the characteristics of the mediator, the personality traits of the mediator matters a lot. And this is something which is recognized by political scholars as well. And that is why I took the example of Lord Krishna here. Now, let's take a brief look at the international legal framework that exists with regard to mediation. When you look at the modern contemporary international law and the focus on mediation, it goes back to the Hague Conventions of 1899 and 1907. It predates the World Wars. So before the World Wars, before we had the United Nations and League of Nations, the mediation framework was defined through the Hague Conventions of 1899 and 1907. It led to the establishment of the Pacific Settlement of International Disputes, which led to the establishment of Permanent Court of Arbitration, which is headquartered at The Hague in Netherlands, to act as an arbitration body. Instead of resulting in a hostile adjudication, where a judicial process is followed, the PCA was founded on the basis of alternate dispute resolution, where the priority is to achieve a compromise that is acceptable to both the parties involved in the conflict. And this can be done through the process of mediation, by focusing on negotiations, on talks, by sitting across the table, and engaging in arbitration efforts. This, in a way, became the initial legal framework for conflict resolution, even during the World War period and post-war period. After the First World War, following the Treaty of Versailles, when the League of Nations was established to prevent another international conflict and to settle disputes through peaceful talks and negotiations, it was the Hague Conventions which served as a basis, providing the initial set of legal framework. After World War II, when League of Nations was replaced by the UN, by the United Nations, this continued to serve as a legal framework. But with the establishment of the UN and the adoption of the UN Charter from 1945, there is a new set of global framework which has been created that provides the set of guidelines and principles to be followed in any mediation and negotiation effort. See, the very purpose of the UN was to prevent any international conflict and resolve any standing disputes between states through peaceful talks and negotiations. If you look at Article 2 of the UN Charter, it explicitly prohibits the use of force or even the threat of force against a sovereign state. It provides absolute protection for the sovereignty and political independence of a state. The only exception is Article 51, where a country can use force only when it is acting in self-defense. And even for that, the bar is set very high. Only if there is an armed attack, only then a country can act in self-defense and use force and can justify it. Otherwise, the use of force is explicitly banned and prohibited under the UN Charter. So, what happens when a dispute comes up or a conflict breaks out? Chapter 6 provides the framework for peaceful settlement of such disputes. The UN Charter nudges the member states to focus on peaceful talks and negotiations to resolve any standing dispute. Article 33 of the UN Charter explicitly calls on the parties to resolve any standing disputes only through talks, negotiations, conciliation, mediation, arbitration, or through judicial settlement. So, if they opt for the judicial settlement route, the UN Charter provides for a judicial body called the ICJ, the International Court of Justice. But if they prefer a non judicial process, then alternate dispute resolution, such as mediation, conciliation, arbitration, this would be the preferred mode of resolving conflicts and resolutions. So in 2011, the UNGA has adopted resolution number 65 bar 283, which defines this framework. And in 2012, a set of guidelines was brought out by the UN known as the UN Guidance for Effective Mediation. So this framework continues to guide countries when it comes to mediation efforts. And the United Nations is also tasked with maintaining peace and stability. So as part of this mandate, since 1950s and late 1940s, the UN has been involved in several peacekeeping missions by deploying UN peacekeeping forces. It has played a proactive role in more than 70 conflicts in the last 7 decades through UN peacekeeping missions and has even tried resolving many disputes and conflicts through talks and negotiations. So, this is the basic background that you need to understand this complex topic and pressing issue. Now, let's try to answer the first question: why Pakistan? Why US is okay in dealing with Pakistan? Why Iran is also okay in accepting Pakistan as a mediator? What is so special about it? Because, see, generally the global impression of Pakistan had started changing over the past decade, especially when its duplicitous act was exposed, where it was involved in backing and sponsoring Taliban, Al Qaeda, and several other anti India terror groups. This is something which was exposed in the Afghan conflict, where the US was involved between 2001 to 2021, particularly after the leader of Al Qaeda, Osama bin Laden, was found in Abbottabad, where US special forces took him out. It had raised very uncomfortable questions about the role of the Pakistani deep state and the connections of the Pakistani army and ISI with terror elements in Afghanistan and in the region. In fact, believe it or not, since 2011, US Pakistan ties had actually taken a hit. Since 2011, no senior leader has visited Pakistan since then. So, tomorrow, when JD Vance lands in Islamabad, he would be the first high ranking leader from the US to enter Pakistan post 2011. Of course, diplomats, officials have reached out, but at the leadership level, US had largely stayed away. In fact, if you remember during the Trump's first presidency, Trump was extremely critical of Pakistan, calling it a country that lies, a country full of deceit. Trump even cut off the financial aid from US to Pakistan. And even the Biden administration had largely stayed away from Pakistan, and Biden didn't even directly engage with the Pakistani leaders who were in power at that time. So, what has changed suddenly? How come Trump today treats Asim Munir as his best friend? How come he treats Shahbaz Sharif as a reliable leader? What changes have taken place? Why Pakistan has been chosen? To understand this, I would like to explain a concept in conflict management and resolution known as the contingency model of mediation, brought out by well-known political scholar Jacob Berkovich. According to the contingency model, for mediating a conflict, there are many factors, many parameters which are at play. One would be the context of the conflict. What's the history of the conflict? The nature of the parties involved. In this case, if you take US, Iran, Israel, Iran, the context goes back to the very core of the Palestinian issue, the Israel Palestine conflict and the two state solution, and the continued bias of US and the West towards Israel, and the violation of Palestinian rights when Israel was unilaterally created in 1948. That remains the root cause, the central cause, which has led to all the proxy conflicts in the region, acts of extremism and even terrorism, and eventually the proxy conflict between Israel and Iran post 1979 after the Iranian Revolution. So, understanding the context, being aware of this, and being mindful of these root causes is essential for a mediator. The nature of the parties involved. What is the objective of Israel here in this war? What is the objective of US? What's the objective of Iran? Being aware of this, being deeply involved with this is essential for a mediator. And understanding the overall nature of the dispute and the characteristics and nature of the mediator is also equally important. When you look at Pakistan here in this context, the question is, does Pakistan possess those abilities? Does it have some sort of leverage with Iran to convince Iran to accept a deal? Does it have some leverage with Trump and the White House to convince the US, which is a global superpower, right? So why would US listen to Pakistan to agree for a compromise? These are essential questions to be answered. And also, as I told you, a mediator should have certain qualities. The mediator should have a clean track record, someone who is seen as a credible player, someone who can be relied upon. And Pakistan is none of that. So how come US and Iran have come to accept Pakistan as a mediator? See, this largely has to do with geography, history, and also a bit of luck with regard to Pakistan. See, Donald Trump has been warming up to Asim Munir and Shahbaz Sharif since he assumed office last year. And this probably has been part of a larger strategy of the Pakistani deep state, led by the current army chief and field marshal Asim Munir. As I told you, from 2011 to 2025, Pakistan had largely lost its global relevance. US Pakistan ties had been affected as India had become a critical strategic partner for the US. US saw through the duplicitous game of Pakistan as well, realizing it's not a very reliable actor. But something started changing from 2025, particularly after the Pahalgam attack and Operation Sindoor. Pakistan credited Trump with the so-called ceasefire that Trump allegedly mediated during Operation Sindoor, which India firmly denies. Pakistan went on to nominate Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize, thus winning the, the best wishes of Donald Trump and developing that bond and a sort of a trust between them. Then Asim Munir gets invited for a lunch by Donald Trump last year in June during the 12-day war when Israel had attacked Iran's nuclear facilities and US joined the conflict by bombing the nuclear facilities at Natanz and Fordo. So US needed the support of Pakistan given that the conflict could have escalated last year as well. That explains the reach out by US towards Asim Munir. And of course, Shahbaz Sharif, the prime minister, would essentially be a puppet of the Pakistani deep state. And today the field marshal has consolidated his power and authority post Operation Sindoor. He has not only elevated his rank, but through the 27th Constitutional Amendment Act, he has become effectively de facto the supreme leader of the Pakistani state today. And Asim Munir and Shahbaz Sharif have willingly opened up Pakistan as a client state to Donald Trump. They have played to Trump's ego by praising him for the ceasefire, by even nominating him for the Nobel Peace Prize. Right? They have played on his ego, and that's exactly what appeals to a leader like Donald Trump. And if you remember, they even carried these rock samples from Pakistan, offering the critical minerals of Pakistan to US investors. Reportedly, Pakistan even offered the strategic Pasni port to be used by American military and navy for strategic influence in the Arabian Sea. So this has won a lot of favor and support from the White House under Donald Trump, creating a better equation between them. So that makes Pakistan a viable actor that United States can work with. And US realizes Pakistan has good connections with Iran, and also it's a neighboring country. And also don't forget, Pakistan has joined the Board of Peace that Donald Trump has set up to bring the Gaza conflict to an end and focus on reconstruction of Gaza. Though the Board of Peace is not going anywhere, it has not really taken off. Pakistan has very openly embraced the membership, joined the Board of Peace, because see, to be a member, you have to contribute $1 billion as per the Charter of Board of Peace. Trump would be the permanent president of the Board of Peace, not the US president, but Trump personally. And Pakistan has no hesitation to accept that. So this willingness of Pakistan to be subjugated to American domination and to be pliable as a client state of the US has, of course, won favor in the White House. On the Iranian side, Iran also sees Pakistan as probably the only viable mediator because, see, Pakistan does not host any American military bases unlike the Gulf countries. Generally, when it comes to mediation, Qatar is the one which was punching above its weight over the last 10, 15 years. It was Qatar which mediated between US and Taliban, between US, Israel, and Hamas. Qatar is known to act as that middleman. But be it Qatar, be it UAE, be it Saudi Arabia, none of them can act as a mediator because they themselves are part of the conflict and Iran would not accept that. They host American bases. Iran has been targeting them. So you can't have a party to the conflict acting as a mediator. They won't be neutral or they won't be unbiased, and Iran will not accept this. On the other hand, Pakistan has no American bases. And more importantly, it does not recognize Israel. It has no diplomatic ties with Israel, which is a precondition for the Iranian regime. And also, don't forget, Pakistan happens to be a major Muslim power and also the only Muslim nuclear state. That gives some amount of weight to Pakistan as a sort of a middle power in geopolitics that Iran can rely upon. And also, Pakistan, Iran have very old linkages between the state and the security establishment. Iran was known to mediate between Pakistan and the Taliban factions and the Baloch insurgents. So there is that old connection that exists, though they have their own rivalries and differences, mainly over the border and the Baloch insurgency. There is a level of contact, a level of trust that exists between them. And that's why Iran also accepts Pakistan as a viable mediator. So in a way, the contingency model works, right? Pakistan can understand the context of this entire conflict. It does have a delicate balance with US and Iran, and it satisfies both the parties. But please notice, Israel is not part of the process directly, right? Israel is largely playing a role behind the scenes, nudging the US, but the talks are being led by US and Iran. Same goes for China. China would also like to be at the center table, but that would never be acceptable to US, right? Iran probably would have been comfortable with China, given that it's a reliable supporter of the state and the Iranian regime, but US would never accept that. So Pakistan finds itself in that unique position, a sweet spot, if you can call it, which is acceptable to both the sides and which does have some credentials at least to act as a mediator. Now, does Pakistan have any hidden agenda here? Is there any other motive? Is Pakistan only trying to bring peace and solve this pressing conflict which is affecting the entire world? Or does it have any ulterior motive as well? Of course, in today's world, any state tries to serve its own self-interest. So Pakistan is looking at this as a great opportunity to further its regional and global influence. Pakistan has always tried this since 1960s. It has been trying to punch above its weight to create a space in global geopolitics to become relevant for major powers, be it the Western countries like US or China, so that it can use it as a leverage against India, to target India, to destabilize India. You can't deny the fact that this is Pakistan's obsession. And to achieve that objective, to target India and destabilize India, it needs backing of major powers. For that, it has to be in the good books of powers like China, powers like US, and the others. So Asim Munir nurtures that ambition. This has been the long held ambition of the Pakistani deep state, the army, and the ISI, which has always tried to build that kind of leverage where Pakistan can play a much bigger role in geopolitics than the size of the country, than the economic might of the nation. Compared to its limited punching power, Pakistan has always tried to punch above the actual weight, to gain that global relevance and to be important in critical camps like Western camp or the Chinese camp, so it can use that and turn that into a leverage against India. I would just like to give an example here, slightly diverting from the topic. Back in 1960s and 70s, India has had an experience with this. In the late 60s and early 70s, Pakistan became the perfect mediator between US and China to reopen diplomatic ties between the two countries. Under President Nixon and his national security advisor Henry Kissinger, US was desperately seeking to re-establish ties with China, and it was looking for a diplomatic opening. But they could not achieve this on their own. This was the middle of the Cold War rivalries. US wanted to wean China away from further Soviet communist influence. Don't forget, Soviet Union and China also had developed their own differences, mainly over their boundary issues and also with regard to their rivalries within the communist bloc. So Nixon and Kissinger, they mainly relied on Yahya Khan, who enjoyed good ties with both the sides. And it is said that Yahya Khan even facilitated a secret visit by Henry Kissinger from Pakistan to Beijing, which laid the foundation for US-China relations to begin. And Pakistan became that perfect mediator. So as Pakistan became very prominent for American interests, we felt the direct impact of this in the 1971 war. That explains why Nixon Kissinger were largely hostile to India during liberation of Bangladesh war. They even tried to back Pakistan by arranging arms supplies from Iran. They nudged China as well to try and attack India to create a second front to try and save Pakistan and ease the pressure on East Pakistan. They even threatened India by deploying the 7th Naval Fleet, trying to threaten India with direct military consequences. So we have had one such experience. Then throughout 1980s, 1990s, early 2000s, Pakistan has always remained relevant. Now take for example how Pakistan worked with the US to create the Afghan Mujahideen to target the occupying Soviet forces in Afghanistan from 1979 onwards. This role that Pakistan played brought it much closer to the US, made it a key partner, and this created a fertile ground for Pakistan to use this strategic depth in Afghanistan to target India by breeding terrorism against India, by using the same infrastructure, the same funds and weapons. So we have had a bitter experience with this. So whenever Pakistan internationalizes the Kashmir issue, when it brings up Kashmir at UN or Organization of Islamic Cooperation, it relies on this global support to target India to interfere with our internal affairs. Be it issues related to Article 370 or anti-CAA protests or the alleged human right violations in Kashmir, Pakistan always tries to internationalize this, and for that it needs global support so that India can be targeted. And that is where Pakistan could probably have a ulterior motive. And not just that, there are other practical concerns for the Pakistani state. Pakistan is home to the second largest Shia population after Iran. Look at the map here, the demographic map. Pakistan is host to around 10 to 15% Shia population out of the total population of the country, which amounts to around close to 20 to 30 million Shias. So Pakistan cannot afford the collapse of a theocratic Shia regime because this will have direct repercussions. We already saw when the Ayatollah was killed on the first day of the war, there was an outburst of anger in Pakistan where Shias targeted the US diplomatic missions. Many people got killed. So it will result in internal unrest if Iran doesn't ensure, or if Pakistan doesn't ensure that Iran's regime survives. So Pakistan has an objective here to try and save and protect the Iranian regime, to ensure that its internal social challenges are not opened up or widened up. The other concern is the long border it shares, roughly 900 kilometers long border in the sensitive Baloch region. Some of the Baloch insurgent groups like Baloch Liberation Army, it does have a presence in the neighboring province of Iran, in the Sistan Balochistan province, with alleged backing of Iranian intelligence. And Iran also alleges that there are few terror groups operating in the Baloch region of Pakistan targeting Iran with Pakistani state support. That's why a couple of years ago, Iran-Pakistan had even exchanged a limited conflict by launching missiles and airstrikes at each other. So Pakistan is worried that the Baloch problem could get aggravated, internal security challenges could come up, and more importantly, if Iran collapses completely, Pakistan will have to deal with the refugee burden. Most definitely, there will be a large outflow of refugees towards Pakistan, and Pakistan can barely afford this. And also don't forget, Pakistan also has a critical dependency on oil and gas imports. It depends heavily on Strait of Hormuz. Right now, it has got an exception from Iran, just like India. But ensuring that Hormuz remains open and oil supplies, gas supplies are restored is equally in the interest of Pakistan as well. So that could also be one of the objectives. And Pakistan is hoping that by becoming a more prominent player in geopolitics, it can attract more funds to back its failing economy. Right now, it's desperate for loans from IMF. It has taken multiple bailout packages. It has received support from China, UAE, Saudi, Qatar, and Turkey as well. But with better influence in the West, with US, it seeks to attract more funds to become slightly financially stable. And also, this in turn would help address Pakistan its internal problems, primarily its security problems. So let's say Pakistan-Iran ties improve because of this. Then Pakistan can rely on Iranian support to counter the TTP and the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan that operates from Afghanistan, and also the Baloch insurgent groups that operate in the region, thus strengthening Pakistan's internal security as well. And don't forget, recently, Pakistan has signed a mutual strategic security defense pact with Saudi Arabia. If the war drags and continues, if Iran continues to attack Saudi energy infrastructure, Saudi Arabia might invoke the pact that provides for collective defense, where Pakistan is supposed to come to the defense of Saudi Arabia by deploying troops and military assets. Now, that is a situation Pakistan doesn't want to get into. As of now, it's not directly involved in the conflict. But if Saudi were to invoke and pressurize Pakistan to contribute to the war efforts to defend against Iran, it might be forced to do it. And this will have repercussions. Then Iran could treat Pakistan as hostile, creating new border challenges and security problems. So Pakistan wants to avoid all of this. And that is one reason why it is trying to position itself as a mediator. So it's not just it is acceptable to both, but Pakistan does have its own self-interest in mind. But the bigger question, is Pakistan really a credible actor? As I said, I think you guys know the answer to this. Pakistan is a state sponsor of terrorism, known for its duplicitous track record in the past, known for betraying its own partners, including the US. Its deep state has a very ulterior agenda. They have an anti-India obsession. And whatever Pakistan does is largely defined by its anti-India obsession. So this does raise question about its credibility and reliability. But can Pakistan try and deliver an outcome? Can Pakistan pull off a masterstroke and end one of the most serious conflicts of our times? And does Pakistan have the leverage? To answer these two questions, I have to explain a couple of theories to you. The theory of ripeness. According to the theory of ripeness proposed by William Zartman, a conflict can be resolved only when it is in the ripe situation. Just like you eat a fruit, you enjoy a fruit when it is appropriately ripe. A conflict can be resolved and you can mediate and achieve a compromise only when it is in a ripe state. And what is this ripe state? The ripe state, according to William Zartman, is mutually hurting stalemate. When neither side is achieving clear victory, when one party is not able to defeat the other in the battlefield, and both cannot risk further escalation. So when there is such a mutually hurting stalemate, that is the ripe situation for resolving a conflict through mediation. And that is exactly what exists right now between US, Israel, and Iran. See, US and Israel underestimated Iran's capabilities, right? Iran has held Hormuz Strait hostage and the global economy hostage. It has targeted Gulf countries and American Israeli targets across the region and caused significant damage as well, from energy infrastructure to critical infrastructure to American military bases. US and Israel have decimated Iran's military capabilities. Its army, air force, navy capabilities have almost been decimated. But IRGC remains a formidable force which can engage in asymmetric warfare by still relying on its arsenal of missiles and drones and proxies like Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. So for both sides, the cost of escalation is very expensive. US, Israel want to claim victory and somehow exit the conflict. When they started the war, they did not have a clear-cut political objective. They tried claiming a military victory, but on the ground, things are different. Iran has gained a strategic upper hand. But Iran doesn't have the capability to drag the conflict further. So the situation is perfectly placed in this ripe position. It is a mutually hurting stalemate for all the sides, so they would like an exit right now. And a mediator can deliver that. Any mediator can deliver when the situation is ripe. That is the theory of ripeness. So Pakistan has this advantage. US wants to exit, Iran wants to exit. And Pakistan, if it plays the cards right, can deliver an outcome. But don't forget the concept of biased mediation. See, generally we assume that a mediator should be neutral and unbiased. But there are political thinkers who disagree with this argument. They think a mediator should have a certain bias. You need to overcome the assumption of neutrality. Why? Only when a mediator has some power and leverage can they offer incentives to both the parties, exert pressure on them and drive them towards a resolution. Now the question is, can Pakistan threaten Iran or offer some incentives to Iran? Can Pakistan have some leverage on US? Can it offer some incentives to US? The answer to this is both yes and no. See, Pakistan does have some leverage with Iran. As I said, it's age-old ties, the border it shares, the mutual security concerns they have. So there are some incentives Pakistan can offer to Iran to work together to stabilize the security situation, assist each other in the long run. but it can't really coerce or force Iran beyond a certain point. With US, there's no question of leverage or coercion, as Pakistan is clearly the weaker party and US is a global superpower. But Pakistan can offer incentives, like how last year Asim Munir and Shabazz Sharif offered Pakistani critical minerals, offered lucrative deals to US. That potentially can be a sort of leverage through which they can try to influence Donald Trump and the United States. So Pakistan does have some amount of leverage to offer some incentives, but it does not have the power to exert pressure or create any coercion. So here, it is highly doubtful if Pakistan can succeed in achieving an outcome. Apart from that, you need to recognize that China is one of the players in this conflict and in the mediation effort as well. In the conflict, China has backed Iran with intelligence, with arms supplies, etc. Now it is using Pakistan as a proxy. It might be Pakistan at the mediating table between US and Iran, but the levers are being pulled not from Islamabad, but from Beijing. China is playing it very smart. China knows very well this is an opportunity to further expose the limitations of American military power, to weaken American influence in West Asia and the larger Indo-Pacific. And it will ensure that it will use Pakistan and the close ties it has with Pakistan to try and leverage this. So it might be very difficult for Pakistan to deliver an outcome, given that Israel is not being committed to any of the guarantees it is providing. Be it the current ceasefire, previous ceasefires, Israel is known to cross all red lines. It is known to have influence over Trump. And Trump has not been able to rein in Israel. Along with that, the role of China, the interests of each party involved, it makes it extremely difficult and challenging for Pakistan to achieve an outcome because it may not have the right leverage. Though it can offer some incentives, it can't coerce anyone, force anyone, or pressurize anyone, and that limits Pakistani options. But however, should we treat this as India's diplomatic failure? See, in India, there are two extreme viewpoints which have come up. Many social media influencers, they are just labeling Pakistan as a client state, calling it a dalal, making fun of Pakistan, saying India can't droop to that level. There are other extreme set of people who are saying India has failed, that India has lost an opportunity. Now, I disagree with both the extreme sides. This cannot be seen as India's failure. It would have been a failure if it was India-Pakistan competition. Like if India, Pakistan were competing to become the mediator and Pakistan gets to do that, not India, then yes, it would have been some sort of diplomatic failure. But this is not. India never wished to be seen as the mediator in this conflict. We realize our limitations as well, right? We have always maintained a very balanced position, calling for talks, calling for negotiations, calling for a peaceful resolution. We will do everything that's needed to help resolve the conflict, but we never aspired that role that Pakistan is now trying to aspire for. So I wouldn't see this as a failure of Indian diplomacy. At the same time, we need to look beyond India-Pakistan rivalry here. You need to be giving some credit to Pakistan's diplomacy and statecraft. Why? If Pakistan, let's say, succeeds, it will benefit India. India would be more than happy if Pakistan can deliver an outcome and end this conflict. Because this war, this unnecessary war started by US and Israel is hurting every country, especially India. From supply chain disruption to energy crisis, the whole world is taking a hit and Indian economy can face a very dire situation. And if Pakistan can strike a solution, nothing better than that, right? India would even welcome that, appreciate that. That's why India's statements have been quite measured. India has said we welcome the talks that Pakistan is hosting. And that's where we need to appreciate Pakistan's diplomacy and statecraft. When you look beyond India-Pakistan rivalry, right? That's when you can really appreciate what Pakistan is trying to do. But if it has an ulterior motive, if it is driven by the shallow objective of targeting India, destabilizing India, using this leverage to later engage this against India, that is a cause for concern. Because we need to learn lessons from history. When we see what Pakistan did in the 1960s and 70s, how it leveraged its influence with US during 1971 war, how it has continued using this over the past decades. to create and breed anti India terrorism than to interfere with India's internal matters by using its global leverage, that indeed will be a cause for concern for India. So, this is where India needs to be cautious, plan accordingly, try and preempt any such Pakistani move if it were to try and leverage this against India. But as long as Pakistan is genuinely interested to end the conflict, well and good for India, well and good for the entire world. But if Pakistan tries to leverage this against us, that is where I think India should be more cautious. What is your take on this? Let me know in the comments. Can Pakistan achieve an outcome? Is it a credible actor for mediation? And should India be worried about this? Or do you think it's a failure of Indian diplomacy? Let me know in the comment section. Thanks for watching.